Picture the version of them that exists a decade from today, long after the performance falls apart. Maybe you've replayed that scene in private, the instant their whole act crumbles, the instant everyone around them finally stops nodding along to the story they keep selling. But what really waits at the end of that road is stranger than the collapse you keep rehearsing. Not a dramatic breakdown, something calmer, something that repeats, something that exposes the true cost of these behaviors more honestly than any spectacular ruin ever could. By the time we finish, you'll grasp where this actually leads, not through wishful thinking, not through payback, but through the plain mechanics of a mind that stays the same across the years. If this is the clarity you've been chasing, pause and hit subscribe now. This space was made for anyone trying to decode manipulation, control cycles, trauma bonding, weak boundaries, and the slow climb back toward valuing themselves again. Every piece here is designed to help you name what occurred and to help you recover. So if that's what your heart needs today, subscribing keeps this understanding returning to you. Let's face the question that likely keeps you up. Where do they land eventually? Most people guess the answer involves loss. They picture this person someday isolated, deserted, drowning in regret among the ruins of everything they wrecked. Loss sometimes arrives, but staring only at that misses the sharper truth. The genuine outcome of these destructive habits isn't losing one bond. It's the recurrence. Let me unpack that, because this reframes everything. When a person moves through life on entitlement, deception, and a permanent refusal to own their actions, they don't feel connection the way you do. For you, closeness means a shared world, a place of tenderness and trust. For them, other people frequently operate as supplies, wells of praise, reassurance, and dominance. And when a bond rests on that base, it follows a foreseeable shape. It tends to cycle through stages. It usually opens with worship. That electric, flooding early chapter where you felt handpicked, understood at a depth nobody had reached before, where they reflected your hopes straight back and made you believe you discovered your match. That chapter felt genuine. Hear this clearly. What you lived through was genuine. Your affection was genuine. Your optimism was genuine. Your ability to love was never the flaw. The flaw was that adoration built on fantasy isn't closeness. It's a mirror. They weren't devoted to you. Often, they were devoted to what you handed them, the applause, the reflection, the thrill of being worshipped. And a mirror can't hold forever, because no living person can endlessly play the role of a flawless supply. So the next stage arrives, tearing down. Gradually, the one who worshipped you starts finding faults. The heat fades. Tenderness turns conditional. Praise curdles into comparison. You begin sensing you're forever falling short, that something inside you keeps letting them down. And you responded the way caring people do. You strained harder. This is where one of the cruelest mental traps clicks shut. Experts call it intermittent reinforcement. Here's why it grips so tightly. When warmth comes at random, appearing then vanishing with no pattern, the brain doesn't let go. It fixates. Unpredictability ranks among the strongest forces binding attachment that we've ever studied. When you can't guess whether the next hour brings affection or ice, you stay locked in. You keep grasping for the kinder version of them. This helps forge a trauma bond. A trauma bond isn't feebleness. It isn't foolishness. It isn't a shortage of self-respect. It's the logical product of your body being trained through loops of comfort and wounding. The same hands that harmed you also delivered escape from that harm. That pairing breeds a pull that can feel unbreakable, even while some part of you understands the relationship is wrecking you. If you've ever wondered why you lingered so long, or why walking away felt like detox, there's your answer. You weren't naive. You were bound through a process engineered by inconsistency. Now return to the ending question. That loop, worship, tearing down, and all the churn between doesn't only strike you. When these habits are buried deep and never questioned, the loop tends to renew with the following partner and the one afterward. Here's the part rarely spoken aloud. The conduct that shattered your bond doesn't dissolve once you exit. If nothing within them shifts, the pattern rides along with them. So the next bond frequently begins identically. Blazing worship. That new person feels handpicked too, exactly as you did. And eventually, if the roots stay untouched, that bond tends to slide toward the same tearing down, the same clashes, the same chaos you knew. You might glance at their fresh relationship and assume they're thriving. They look settled. They look like they finally cracked the code with someone new. Yet what you're usually witnessing is a loop restarting, not an exception to it. You're seeing the worship stage again, the very stage you once inhabited, and that's precisely why fantasizing about their ruin keeps you caged. Let me be direct and truthful, because you've earned honesty over soothing fairy tales. I won't guarantee cosmic revenge. I won't claim they'll certainly finish alone, wretched, or shattered. That isn't psychology. That's vengeance wearing the costume of wisdom, and it fastens your gaze on them rather than your recovery. Reality is subtler. Certain people with heavy narcissistic traits function extremely well. They can be magnetic, accomplished, socially fluent. They can sustain bonds, occasionally for years, especially beside partners willing to keep paying the toll. So no, life won't always hand you some visible, theatrical downfall. If your healing hinges on watching them crumble, you could wait endlessly. And in that waiting, you stay tethered. But here's what generally holds. When someone leans forever on manipulation, entitlement, blame dodging, and control and won't examine themselves truthfully, consequences follow. Not always loud, not always seen, but real. Trust wears thin across time. Those who once admired them quietly retreat. Bonds grow briefer, thinner, more transactional. Longtime friends slip away. Family ties fray. The people who read the pattern plainly stop lingering nearby, and the person ends up circled by newer, less informed faces, because whoever knew them longest learned what you learned. This is the softer consequence, not a dazzling explosion of downfall, but a steady shrinking, a slow buildup of broken trust and shaky ties. A life where profound, enduring closeness gets harder to keep, because real closeness demands exactly what these habits reject: openness, ownership, seeing another human as completely real. Now let me answer what I know you whisper in the dark. Will they ever grasp what they did? Here's the hard truth. Grasping it requires a capacity these habits labor to dodge. It demands enduring shame, sitting inside the raw fact that you wounded someone you claim to cherish. For many driven this way, shame feels intolerable. It endangers the very self-image they built to endure. So rather than feeling it, they redirect it. They rewrite events. They cast you as the villain. They shove responsibility outward so it never settles on them. That's why the realization you crave may never surface. Not because your suffering wasn't real, but because confronting it needs an inner muscle they may never have grown. Will they ever mourn losing you? They might miss what you supplied, the ease, the steadiness, the applause, yet missing a supply differs from treasuring a person. And regret born from lost resources isn't remorse born from empathy. If regret ever comes, it may resemble irritation at losing something handy more than true grief for hurting you. Will they treat the next one kinder? Only if something authentic transforms and real change is precise. It's not a brief thaw after getting exposed. It's not sudden sweetness once you draw a line. Genuine change demands lasting self-examination. Steady accountability and real behavioral shifts held across time, usually with professional guidance. Losing you doesn't manufacture that. Consequences aren't transformation. Let that settle. Losing access to a person doesn't birth self-awareness. Someone can lose partner after partner and still never turn inward because their reasoning for every loss stays identical. It was the other one's fault. When you never inspect yourself, each ending merely reinforces the belief that everybody else is broken. That's why the loop renews, not because they're cursed, but because nothing has broken the cycle from within. Let me pause, because if this is helping you understand things you've carried alone, that counts. If you want more of this, insight that helps you decode these patterns, dissolve trauma bonds, rebuild limits, and reclaim yourself, subscribe and remain here. Healing goes smoother when you aren't stumbling blind, and everything here is meant to light that path. Now I want to turn toward you because this was never truly about them. Why does it feel like they slipped free? Because you're weighing consequences wrongly. You're hunting a moment of collapse. But the actual consequence isn't a vivid scene. It's a gradual hollowing of their relational world, and you may never see it. Their consequences aren't yours to watch or enforce. And beneath all this sits a harder question. Why does their suffering matter so deeply to you? I ask kindly, because I understand. When someone wounds you profoundly and strolls off unscathed, the unfairness feels crushing. You want existence itself to acknowledge what happened. You want proof your pain was real and that they were wrong. But listen closely, because this is the pivot. Your pain is already real. It doesn't require their ruin to become valid. The truth of your experience doesn't rest on them ever confessing. You don't need their admission to believe your own memory. And this leads to what these habits quietly did to you, because this kind of abuse doesn't only sting in the moment, it corrodes something deeper. It corrodes your sense of self. When you spend months or years hearing that your view is wrong, your feelings excessive, your recall faulty, your needs unfair, something breaks inside. You start doubting yourself, you hand your reality over to them, you second-guess your gut, you apologize for nothing, you shrink to keep calm. This is identity erosion among the deepest wounds of prolonged manipulation. So when you fixate on where they land, part of you is still asking them to finish a story about your own value. You get to write your own ending, whole, awake, free.